recording.
Well, do you want to just start out with since we're going to talk about fathering and the meaning crisis, um, I, we kind of had a short chat in the Discord about it, but I wanted to have a conversation with you about it. And maybe we can, if this does get viewed, maybe we can just introduce who we are and who our families are.
Yeah, sure.
Just to get an idea where we are in the fathering stage.
Yep. I guess I'll start. My name is Jeff with F's, not Jess with S's.
Right.
It's funny. This is completely side note, but in my very first conversation with Paul, down in his description, he wrote my name as Jess, Jess.
Oh.
So it's very funny. I don't know if it's still there. He probably hasn't changed it.
Right.
But yeah, I'm somewhere in midlife now. I'm mid 40s. So my kids are mostly grown. I have a child who's reached adulthood and another one who is right on the legal precipice of adulthood. So one is still in the home and the other one is out on their own.
You have a son and a daughter?
Yep.
All right. Well, I just turned 41 the other day. And then I've got 3 boys at 14, 12, and 9.
Okay.
So I'm just entering the teenage years, but out of the kid stage, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I just wanted to have this conversation because I thought it'd be interesting. And especially, estuary is bouncing around my brain. And I kind of have an inkling some of this will inform my estuary thoughts as well.
Okay.
I kind of wanted to start out with, do you watch any John Vervaeke?
I really have not watched any John Vervaeke at all. The majority of my exposure is through what Paul has shared on his channel. Yeah. And,
well, he has this part on love, and I'll just kind of go through it real fast. There's not too much to it, but he talks about the how. Well, there's the 3 types of love. There's agape, eros, and philia, and these are the Greek terms. If you've been in church or Sunday school, you may have come around these, but there are 3 different. We have one term for love, so you can love your wife, but you can also love potato salad, and those are not the same things.
Right.
And you can love your children, and that's different also. So he talks about the 3 different kinds of love, and when he talks about it in a totally different way than I ever heard, and I heard about him in Sunday school. They're like philia is like brotherly love or whatever, and that's kind of right, but the way he describes it is so much better. So philia is like love of cooperation. So this is like love between equals, friendship, neighbors. This is like we work together. There's it's on the same level playing field. Eros, which normally gets talked about in just term of the erotic, but or being in love, but eros is more of becoming one with something. And the way John talks about it is it's about consuming. So you can, like, your love of food is an eros love, because it becomes part of you, it becomes one with you. And then so you think of it in terms of consuming, and then you think of like when the husband and wife, they consummate their marriage. I don't know if the words are linked, but consume and consummate, like you become one with each other. There's a connection between, you're trying to become one with something. So that's eros. And then there's agape, and agape is the love of a parent for a child. And it's not like cooperation, and it's not consuming. It's the love the parent gives to the child makes them into a person. it creates them. Love in this agape sense creates people. And so this is what, so in the New Testament, it talks about the love of Christ for the world is agape love because he's making it into something. So that when he talked about that agape being a creative force and making something, and it's even sacrificial, because like as a parent, when they're a baby, like you do get positive feelings from taking care of your kids, and there's lots of reward, but you don't do it for the reward. The reward's kind of like a byproduct.
Mm-hmm.
And really you kind of give in sacrifice a lot of times, and you see them, become a person. So I'm just seeing this now with, my boys are getting to the stage where we're like having like actual conversations instead of just playing around or whatever, so they're becoming people. They're slowly like becoming. So I just really like that definition of agape, and I wanted to bring it up because so in my sort of evaluation of this whole meaning crisis and what we've been talking about in the Discord, basically modernity or Western civilization is coming apart. There's this fragmenting, this we're kind of coming to the end of something possibly. We are there's feelings of chaos and disorder, and trying to find a footing is hard, and trying to find stability is not easy. So if we're supposed to be building things up, we're supposed to be building these children up while the world is falling apart. there's the conundrum right there. Like, how do you parent during the meaning crisis?
Mm-hmm.
So my boys are young enough to where I don't think they're aware of any of the meaning crisis, and probably it's different with your kids, because once they get into high school, that's where some of this starts, and then into college it definitely heightens, and then there's just all the growing up stuff you have to do anyway, like despite the cultural or whatever zeitgeist there is. Just growing up is trying to form an identity and separate from your parents and start a family, or there's all that happening too. That's just always a part of growing up. So I don't know, I kind of that's how I'm sort of just framing things in my own mind. And so my boys are like too young to really sense all this, and they're not going through any existential crisis yet, but I imagine they will. And what can I do to help prepare them for basically what's unexpected and unknown? Because I don't know what they're going to struggle with. I know what my growing up experience was coming out of evangelicalism, and but their experience is totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is some of the reason why a lot of like Jonathan Pajot has been really helpful to me, why a lot of what Paul is talking about is helpful, because it's really trying to get down to like what are the important things that are true no matter where you are in the meaning crisis or whatever. Like what are the bedrock things we can always count on, that we can always, this idea of being the one who, the Jordan Peterson idea, being the one that can stand on the line between chaos and order and find their way, and finding the logos, and not falling prey to nihilism. And I don't know. There's just like some big picture things that have been helpful for me. And then it hasn't gotten to the point where I can talk to my kids about this stuff, because they'd be like, Dad, what are you talking about? Like, I literally just play Pokemon and ride my scooter and complain about what's for dinner.
That's one of the questions that was just running through my mind now, is if you were to sit down with your kids and you were to say, so tell me what your struggles are with the meaning crisis, you wouldn't say that, because it wouldn't make sense. But if you thought that there was a way where they could understand what was meant by the meaning crisis, how would you like reformulate what you mean by the meaning crisis in maybe the simplest terms possible?
I don't know. I think you got to frame it in like, it's got to be in some sort of like specific experience that they're going through, like trouble with a classmate, or you know, trying to find friends. And my boys are interesting just because like they're so laid back that like, I mean, this whole COVID quarantining stuff, social distancing, like I'm like, do you miss your friends? They're like, nah. All right. And obviously like sometimes they do, and I think they don't realize it. And so we've been able to get together here and there with people, and, you know, in a backyard, or, you know, trying to make it as safe, whatever. And then I can see a noticeable difference, like after they've actually had some interaction with some peers. But like, I don't know how I don't know what their experience is. It's because this is just normal life, and there's already kind of like, they're trying to figure out what Christianity is. My oldest has been baptized. My middle son is always just asking questions like, why would God do that? You know, like, God just killed those people. I'm like, yeah, I know. And then I try explaining, he's like, and then he just loses interest. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. So I don't know how to frame it. I don't know how to bring it down to their level, or I don't even know how they're experiencing it. I try to think about when I was a kid, what I was thinking about. Like, my understanding of what happened when I was a kid comes from when I was grown up, and I look back on it and I kind of put it together, but I didn't know what was going on then. So, I mean, I mentioned in our chat that a couple things I've been doing it, like for the past several years, I've been reading a lot with my boys, and like finding just books that are just like, you know, like Where the Red Fern Grows, and other books about boys and their dogs, and about hunting, and about getting lost in the wilderness. And then like you know, some of the more fantastical books about, you know, the Olympians, and this is the school, what's the one, Percy Jackson. And so gotten into some of that, and then, you know, trying to read the Bible with them, and they haven't really like got a real interest in what the Bible says. Like, they'll get through a chapter or something and be like, oh, that was interesting, but they don't really have like oh, I want to learn more. So but that was kind of like, as I was, you know, this is when Peterson came out and just talking about the importance of mythology and narrative and like all these things. And I'm just like, well, let me just start reading to my boys, because I don't know what to tell them, like as far as like propositionally, like how to, you know, I don't know how necessarily to talk to them about like what are the most important rules you need to but I can definitely read stories about characters going through crisis, and then them making it through and overcoming, or, you know, what about you? So your kids are older.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are they feeling any of this meaning crisis stuff, and how are, you know, how did they experience it?
Well, that's why I asked what the definition would be, because I hear it said a lot. I know it's part of Vervaeke's entire, series. It's in the title, and I haven't watched Vervaeke, but I've just heard Paul talk about it. I've also, I think Rebel Wisdom talks about sense making and how our sense making tools are falling apart or something like that. From what I can see, like they're doing different things. So one of them, I think, is kind of making sense through crowdsourcing method. Maybe crowdsourcing is the wrong way to say it. Um, friendship circles, social circles, and kind of just that's, I don't know. It's hard to articulate, honestly. Um, I'm not sure if they are having the same experience of what we're calling the meaning crisis that we are. I don't think they're necessarily seeing everything that we're seeing, especially being younger. Um, my experience in just being an adult and living life is that I'll find whatever tool I can to help me make sense of the world until it stops working. And then I find another tool. And then I just,
Right.
it's almost like being adrift at sea. Like maybe your boat has just been completely blown to smithereens and all you've got is a plank. And you're riding on that plank until it gets, so waterlogged that it starts to sink. And then you start treading water until you can find something else, that's a little bit more stable to hang on to. And that's what I feel like my life experience is like, is I'm in this sea of chaos this whole time, but I will find something. And maybe that analogy that I just gave broke down. It's not that I find another piece of wood that just hasn't quite gotten waterlogged yet. It seems like I've found something a little bit better to help me, it's like I found a bigger piece or a better plank to stand on that seems to be doing
Right.
it. And I feel like maybe my kids are just on whatever their stable plank is right now, if that makes sense. And they're not like it's a longer term project until that thing starts to be like, oh yeah, well this thing over here makes a little bit more sense. So now I'm shifting and I'm looking back on what that thing was. I feel like I'm talking in a lot of abstraction and generality, so I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly
I mean,
how to characterize it.
yeah. Well, that's part of why I wanted to have this conversation, because I'm thinking about it in just abstractions and generalities too.
Mm-hmm.
And so you if you're shipwrecked in the ocean, like you hopefully get a boat um someday. Hopefully there's a ship somewhere, and then you want to try to align yourself to the stars, because the stars will tell you which direction you're heading and what um where you're going. Or if you have a place you want to go, you can use the stars to help navigate.
Mm-hmm.
you know um so I guess for me, I'm always trying to find out what those stars are and what they mean, because even if I'm holding on to a board, maybe if I learn about the stars, and when my kids will eventually have like a small boat, and I could pass the knowledge of the stars to them, to where they could start navigating, you know
You talking about the books? I mean, I think I think everything that you described in there about, I don't know how to tell my kids, so here are the right things that you need to do in these situations, like particular things that you can give to them that they can just apply in every situation. But in story, I think that you're right. You can show, hey, here are some characters, here are some obstacles that they faced, here's how they overcame them, here's some ones that they didn't overcome, and here's what the result was.
Right.
There are certainly, I think, valuable lessons to be learned from that then um, kids can apply, because you will very much face similar patterns, not necessarily similar scenarios, but patterns, large scale patterns are similar, where I am going to either be put into or put myself into situations where I then face obstacles that I will either overcome or not, and there will be consequences of either not overcoming those obstacles or overcoming them,
Mm-hmm.
or ignoring them, and then they grow bigger, in Petersonian fashion.
Right.
You ignore it, it's just going to grow. And so with my kids, we did a little bit of reading, but not a whole lot. Ours was probably more movies and TV
Yeah,
shows,
movies. Yep.
movies and TV shows. And so that's where I don't think it was even necessarily after we watched them, I would be like, okay, kids, now let's sit down and let's talk about what we learned.
Right.
Try to draw a moral out of the story. And so the moral of the story is this, it wasn't really that. It was just, wow, we just really enjoyed that film, or we really enjoyed that piece of art, and it was meaningful. We can't necessarily even drive at what the meaning behind it was. I'm not really sure. We just equate this particular film or this particular series as good. One of the ones that
Right.
my kids and I had as they were growing up, I want to say it's about maybe 10, almost 15 years old now. And we've talked about this on the Discord, not necessarily you and I, but me and some other people have had conversations about it.
Mm-hmm.
The Nickelodeon series Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I don't know if you've experienced that with your kids, but that was just a really big one for us that we were really able to enjoy. It's got a lot of depth to it. It's got, a lot of different levels and complexity, at least in my mind, going on at the same time. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, I tried watching it with them. It was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and
Okay.
they were, I think they were a little young for it. At least my kids were. They didn't seem to like get into it. So we watched 3 or 4 episodes, and they were just kind of like, eh.
Yeah.
So, but there's some shows we watch, and they're like, can we watch more? All right.
That's the direction you got to go.
Yeah, it's like, what interests you? You can't really like. There'll be things that like strike your interest, and you don't necessarily know why.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting point, because like it's like the propositional has broken down, and 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 so we're a little bit more we're looking for examples more than we are looking for sets of rules or beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
and then what does that mean for us as parents? Maybe the way we do things is more important than what we're saying right now,
Mm.
because it's hard to know what to say, but I kind of have an inkling about how I should act.
Yep.
About how I should like make sure my home is a certain way, and prevent myself from like ruining it by being too angry or or being too passive, or like there's not much to like say in that, other than just be like, all right, I want to be this certain way, so that
Mm-hmm.
my kids see that, so that they can try to emulate that when they yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of I've heard Paul say it a couple of different times in a few different contexts, but I think people who were about to become parents or who were relatively new parents, particularly, I think this question was asked by a guy to Paul, but it's just like, what are some good tips, or how can I be a good father? What can I do? And the answer that I heard Paul give that I think is good advice is just you need to be the best version of yourself that you can be, and that's how you can be a good father to your kids. And when I think about that, at least that's what when I've consciously been intentional about it, is what I've tried to focus on is I have a general sense of things that I should do and things that I shouldn't do. And so I tried to do the things that I should do, just like on a personal level, and tried to stay away as best I could from doing the things that I knew I shouldn't. I wasn't 100% successful at either of those.
Yeah.
There were times where I was just like, well, the kids don't see me right now, so it's not going to have an impact. But that was just me, consciously trying to excuse away doing or engaging in something that I knew I shouldn't have been.
Right.
But on the whole, what I've learned also from having a parent and watching them is there are things that they will emulate where I'm just like, yeah, I know that I don't want to emulate that. So
right.
Your kids will also learn from your mistakes as well as as the things that good examples that you're trying to present.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, I don't necessarily know where to go from here, but it's
well, one thing that I'll throw in here too is I think this applies to parenting. There was a clip that was going around social media back in 2016 before the election, and it was Pastor Andy Stanley. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not.
No.
He's like in the evangelical world. He grew up with a pretty famous dad for a pastor, Charles Stanley.
Oh, yeah.
So he's Charles Stanley's son. I want to say he's in his maybe late 50s now, early 60s. I don't know. I don't know for sure how old Andy Stanley is. But anyway, around 2016, he was doing a sermon series, I think, around politics. And he said something along the lines in this clip that was making the rounds that said, no matter what it is that you think about whichever candidate it is that you want to vote for president or for whatever office that somebody's running for, he essentially said, whatever you post on social media, I don't think he said it's not going to make a difference, but essentially he said the place where your voice is going to be heard is when you actually cast your vote. And anything else besides that, yes, your voice is going to be heard, but there is huge potential for you to essentially destroy any type of influence or opportunity to actually continue to have a conversation with someone that maybe you do disagree with if you're just strongly vocalizing, your opinion that you're 100% certain about. Mm-hmm. And I'm very much paraphrasing and probably putting some more in there than what he said. But I thought that was, well, one of the lines that he ultimately ended with was something like, don't sacrifice your influence with this person to make the strong truth point that you want to make. Mm-hmm. Don't kill that opportunity. And I mention all that because I think that that's applicable to parenting as well. I may feel very strongly about something that my kid is engaging in, an idea that they're just like trying on,
right,
and exploring. And I might feel like that is a horrible idea. Here's what that could lead to. Here's all the problems that I see with that. I'm very in very strong disagreement with that. But what I found is the stronger I am at vocalizing those things, the more that they want to pursue those those ideas and
Right.
see, well, man, I wasn't really even thinking about it with all that much depth. I was just skimming the surface level of it. But now you're telling me all this other stuff is in there. Well, I got to go investigate for myself.
Right. Right.
Now I got to do it in secret. I'm not going to be open
Yeah.
about it anymore because I can't handle, or actually you can't handle it. You've just shown
Yeah.
me with the way that you're reacting that you're not a safe person for me to share the truth with.
Yep.
And I've been fortunate. I haven't had anything like that blow up on me where I feel like my kids, and maybe, you know, if you ask them, they're like, oh yeah, I do not talk to dad about these things, or I don't share this with him.
Right.
I hope that that's not the case. It might be the case, but I try to be as safe a harbor as possible for as many what I consider dangerous ideas as possible.
Right.
And I try to share perspectives with them that maybe they're not considering, but also not like saying, well, have you thought about this? No, you probably haven't. That means you're dumb.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that, you know, anybody who, I don't think that the majority of parents who are just even trying, you know, giving 1% effort would ever want to do that, you know. But sometimes my worst instincts get the best of me and they end up, you know, creating a problem. But what I try to do when I recognize it is maybe even days later or weeks later, come back and just say, hey, this just dawned on me that this could have been the way that I was coming across. And I really wanted to tell you that's not what I intended. And I'm sorry if it caused this. And if you feel, you know, unsafe talking to me about this, I understand that. And if you don't want to anymore, I also understand that as well. But I just wanted to, just wanted to tell you, I recognize that. And I'm trying to be better about it. And so if you see that in me, feel free to point it out as well, if you feel like I'll be able to hear you.
Right. Yeah. Cause I mean, when I was in my 20s and stuff, I was like getting into Marxism and trying to figure all that out. Cause I was just trying to figure all that out, and like, it seemed like a good idea to me. It seemed like it was like pretty, you know, progressive place to be. And yeah, my dad never got on me about it. We would have conversations and he would never like concede a point that he didn't agree with, but he never like shut things down, which I always appreciate. You know, I never felt too much pressure from him about any of that stuff. And then, yeah, my dad's just an interesting guy because he left. He was a professor. He was at the University of Idaho, and he left to become a missionary. So he quit his job when I was 15. Well, we started doing missions work when I was 13. So he was just visiting. He was in town for a bit, and we were talking about. He's always like, "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry what I did to you guys." You know, and he's like half joking, but he's also like, you know, he's thinking about the last, you know, however long it's been, 30 years, and he's like, you know, me and my brother and sister are all kind of in good places, so it's all kind of worked out. And there were struggles in there and stuff, but I always appreciated that I told him, I was like, I appreciate the fact that you were like willing to take that chance and you were willing to do something that you believed in that wasn't the normal thing to do, because the smart thing to do was to stay at the university and finish there as a vice president and make a bunch of money and have some status and secure a financial future for your kids. But I feel like he made a choice, and I think it was the right choice, to pursue what was meaningful. And it wasn't necessarily like it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like amazing either. The whole missionary thing. Um, but I know that I'm probably better off, at least like mentally. I don't know. How do you measure that stuff? How do you measure about two different futures? But I think about that. That's an example I try to do, or I hope I can do for my kids. Like I've been more, I'm working in animation, so I haven't really had a chance to like be an example like that, where I just like leave everything, and go follow Jesus. But maybe that day will come, who knows? But um, yeah, I mean, even talking about it today with my dad, like we can't articulate what happened in those years. We can't say, what was all it was his desire to do what was best. And, and then taking like real risks and real actions with us and our family. Um, and, it was ballsy, and it was cool. And I'm just thankful that I had kind of that example in my life. And so like, yeah, and I don't necessarily like it. It's yeah, it's just trying to live, I guess, trying to figure out what story I'm living in and make that a good one, and make it one that my kids can see and be a part of, and make sure that they're aware that they're involved in a story that is meaningful, and you know and that they have worth no matter like what happens like in the world around us. um so
Made me think of kind of linking back to one of the things you started off with are the different Greek words for aspects of love or types of love. Um, the agape part, um, like one of the things that I told my kids was, no matter what you do, I will always love you. And so I think, just to use the frame as you used it earlier, I think that was part of building them up as a person, is to know that, you know, you can go out there and, there are things that I would prefer that you not try, that I would hope
yeah,
that choices that you would not make, because they would be harmful to your person.
don't do heroin.
Right, right. I wouldn't wish that on you. I would try to do everything in my power to keep that from happening. Um, but also, if you do, that will not end my attempt to continue to build the person that you are, that you are becoming, and to build that person up in um, what I think is what's the right word for it? Is the I'll say intent. Um, the person that you are intended to be, not by me, because my agape, I don't think, is what created that person. Right? I'm just a part
Right.
of helping to to edify that person through agape, and um, I'm just playing a role in helping to reveal what the intended person always was.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm encouraging the agency in my child to also try to build up what is intended, what
Oh,
was
right, that's
ultimately
good.
was what brought them into being in the first place.
Yeah, because we have a role in how we grow up also. And if you you see that in people where if they have a rocky relationship with their parents, they won't treat themselves right either, and they'll get stuck in cycles, or they'll be like, they won't develop as a person as much as they could as if they treated themselves better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's so hard too. It's so scary, because I think I'm doing the right thing, and I may be doing it exactly right with what I just talked about. And with the agency that they've been granted, by virtue of being human, they can act completely contrary to what I was trying to encourage them into, right? So as a parent, ultimately, I don't have control. I can do what I can do, and I can try to do the best that I can. And there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees that anything that I did is going to result in them continuing to build up that I guess germ of a person. Probably the wrong way to say it. That
The
nucleus,
seed of a person.
the seed of a person that we've all been entrusted with, first in ourselves, and then if we do become parents, secondly in our children. But now, as I'm thinking about it, it's not just if you become a parent. You're also entrusted with the seed of every other person that you ever meet in your life, that you ever interact with whatever interactions that you have. I can either try to influence the seed of that person for growth, or sometimes I'm careless about it, and I'm not encouraging growth in that person at all. And sometimes I am thwarting the growth of that person. Hopefully not intentionally, but certainly unintentionally. I do that probably every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When is there ever? Okay, so we talked. Don't do heroin. But there's obviously like ideas and ways of living that we're gonna, think are equivalent. That's not necessarily building them up in a way that um, we think they should be.
I'm sorry, I gotta derail the conversation for just a second. There's no pun intended by that when you know what I'm talking about. Is it a Kantian little thought experiment about the trolley?
Oh, I don't know who came up with it.
I don't know, but anyway, I just thought about, well, maybe if it's Kant, I'll use Kant. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But in the trolley car, thought exercise, there may be a time to do heroin if it's the lesser of two evils. I don't know. Anyway.
Never rule out heroin altogether.
That's right.
Oh man. Yeah. So you leave the conversation open. So like my sister went through a bunch of drug use and just terrible decisions for, I don't know, it was like 8 years of just like hell for my parents. And she was just kind of just off doing her own thing, but around, so that they had to help clean up messes and were impacted directly by all of her shenanigans. And she's since come out of that, thank God. But I just remember my mom and dad like just trying to figure out where that line was, from just saying like, we never want to see you again, to like keeping the communication open to where she could at least come back when she needed to. And a lot of times she would, and she would, get whatever she wanted and then go back on her way. And, and then I saw my parents go through that. And, yeah, it's just not easy trying to figure out where those lines are and what's best to do, because I mean, I see what you're talking about. Like, they really loved her through that. And there was something in her that she was suppressing that they wanted to see still grow. And it was like a fight the whole time. And yeah, I mean, thank God she she made it through without without dying, because that could have happened. And yeah, agape is so powerful, man, because if you just think about how any one of us can be like can be retarded in our growth somehow. Like parts of us are held back, and for whatever reason, could be like trauma, could be just being naive and whatever. And there's stuff in us that hasn't grown, that that's inside of us, but needs to be loved into existence.
Yeah, I told you I wasn't not really versed at all in Vervaeke, but Paul did focus one of his videos on Vervaeke's Agape section. And out of growing up in church my entire life, Vervaeke's is still the best. Really,
yeah. What the what the heck?
It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal how he drew that out. It was a thing of beauty, honestly. I highly recommend it. I think it's episode 13 in his Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. I'd have to check that.
Okay.
But if people haven't seen it, I highly recommend they go.
Yeah, it's so good.
Check it out. It's phenomenal.
I watched the clip just before we got on here, and yeah, it's just good. And the way he builds up to it, because he's talking about, he talks about the logos, and then he talks about kairos, and kairos is like the correct time for something to happen. And so there are these kairotic moments that are basically the time is ripe for some sort of change to happen. And the logos comes and he provides that change. And the change is metanoia, which is like an awakening. This is being born again. This is like when you have a religious conversion. This is when you have like a profound personal transformation. So
isn't that the same word for repent, the metanoia?
It could be.
I think it is. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
I think it's all wrapped together. Awakening, repentance, yeah, all that. Because you leave what was, repenting is leaving what was behind and going forward with something new. So it's
aside the waterlogged plank that I'm
right. Yeah. It's exactly like it's going from the plank to the bigger plank.
The bigger plank, the raft.
hopefully something that's got a sail, so you can at least catch the wind.
Right.
But like he talks about that first. So he talks about this transformative process, and he's like, the way the Christians thought of this whole transformative process was agape. It's love. And so then he talks about, and that's the love of a parent for a child that makes them into a person. And I was just like, oh yeah, of course. Like that's all just makes sense. Why didn't anyone in church tell me any of this? Like I've heard all those words in random lessons, but I never heard it all put together. And so, but like I've been going through, like my first talk with Paul was about the book of Job. And so like the book of Job puzzled me all the way. It puzzled me for years and years and years. I mean, it still is kind of a puzzle for me, but I figured I got a better idea. But Leviathan always, like, it's one of those things, like Leviathan, like fascinates me and fascinated me for years as I was going through like all my spiritual deconstruction stuff or whatever. I was just like, what is this Leviathan doing at the penultimate point in God's speech at the end of book of Job? And the creationists are all like, oh, it's an alligator. Like, well, that's dumb. But it turns out like it was God's battle with Leviathan, and it's a creation story. So this is I don't want to get too off track here, but I was already in this mindset like, oh, like that whole thing with Leviathan was a creation story. And then this whole agape and renewal is a creation story. Like it's going from the old to the new. And so like, Yeah, in my mind, everything, like I can just see now why Paul would say like agape is the highest value. Love is the highest value because it makes everything else possible. And Vervaeke even says that like love isn't a feeling. It's a relationship that you have. It's an agent arena relationship is what he says, but it's a relationship you have with everything around you. So the world, God, people, love, because love can make you angry. Love can make you sad. Love can make you happy and joyful. So love is not a feeling. Love can provide all these things. And so like, and love is also the thing that enables creation, enables the creation of people. Yeah. Anyway, I just love that. I just love it. It's so, I guess I agape.
It's like a super stimulant, an accelerant, it's like the ingredient that you can infuse into anything to have it. Like I think about cancerous cells and how they're, I guess, what we would consider chaotic growth or destructive growth in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just growth out of control, unnecessary, disordered,
Mm-hmm.
consumes everything that it can, destroys everything in its wake as it's growing more and more. And it's almost like love, as we're talking about it, is the positive version of what cancer does.
Right. It grows, something grows properly.
It grows properly and it doesn't destroy everything in its wake. It brings everything in its wake more into life, more incorporates it. And, I'm an old Star Trek The Next Generation fan, and that triggered a thought of like the Borg in Star Trek The Next Generation, where
Yeah.
they're like assimilating. It's not assimilating anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's setting it's setting everything onto its right course, setting everything onto its proper course, and not in a totalitarian kind of way, but in a way where, as the thing is ultimately moving more and more in the direction of being set right, it becomes more and more enjoyable to infinite degrees, at infinite speeds, at infinite progression, I should say.
Yep. Yeah. And there's something that's like it's yeah, it's like I have two thoughts. So and maybe something's come together for me right now because I don't know if you heard my U-shaped story thing. So there's so you start out, then you have your descent, and then there's redemption. So it's creation, fall, redemption. It's just like the basic thing. But like this is, so in my personal life, I had my religious upbringing, then I had my deconstruction, and then I'm having some sort of uh, rebirth out of the deconstruction. And then and then I was saying how society, we're like going from modernism, and then modernism's fallen. And in this fall, there's this, multiplicity. It's falling apart. It's a breaking, it's fracturing. And then we need the logos to help redeem things. We need a resurrection kind of thing. And I was like, because we can all see the inevitability of how things fall apart. It's like a law in physics. Everything just sort of bleh. So but in the Christian story, there's something inevitable about redemption and resurrection. Because Jesus wasn't dumb. When he went to die, he knew it was going to happen, but he still knew he needed to die in order. And then C.S. Lewis talks about it with Aslan, like Aslan knew the deeper magic that the witch didn't. The witch just knew, like, if I can bring everything down, I can bring Aslan with it, but Aslan knew the deeper magic that this resurrection was going to happen. And maybe agape is the force. So if there's like a gravitational force that that's pulling everything down and apart. Agape is the force that's making everything grow and go up.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also this weird sort, like the way I see it is like, you know, you start at a point and then as you descend, like things come apart, but it comes apart in a chaotic manner. But agape makes things grow, but it also grows apart like a tree, but it grows in an orderly, proper manner.
Mm-hmm.
Things in the descent become chaotic and it's just stupid how it comes apart. There's nothing to it, but the way a tree grows in the branches and the diversity that it has within itself, it's still united, but it still comes out as a multiplicity. Like you still end up with all. Anyway, those are just a couple thoughts that I had.
Yeah. And we're running out of time.
Yeah,
And
we
I had
are.
a thought that just jumped into my head, and I'm not even sure where I need to think about this more, if it could go anywhere. But just the example of a tree that you gave, right? When it comes back up, it's growing all the branches and all the leaves, and it's extending out. If you think about a tree, though, I'm thinking about the bottom part of the U that you were just talking about, and it made me think of the roots. And that made me wonder, well, do the roots make sense or not? Or are they all nonsensical? If we could compare these two, illustrations, I'm just not sure. But the idea that formed in my head, and I don't even know if this is true or not, but it would seem that the larger a tree gets and the more it grows out, the stronger its root network has to become. So maybe that whole falling apart and that scattering, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means or where it goes, but it's kind of, it's making way for, it's making it's creating some kind of stabilization for this further growth. And then I had one other idea as you were talking about the U-shaped story pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like as we're living life and we're going through the U-shaped story, like that seems to happen on small scale, but it seems to be a pattern that continues, right? And so it's almost like your U that you gave us, you go down and then you come back up, but on the other side, you're not at the same level where you started. It's like it zooms really high, and then you start again. Oh no, I'm off screen, but then you start again, and then it happens over again. And the place where you are after you go through that pattern multiple times is you're like way up here where you started down here initially.
Yeah, and if you tried to stay the same, you would just be like there.
Right.
But if you embrace the working of God, you'll end up at a more glorious place than
right. And it just keeps going. It doesn't ever. Yeah. There's
further up, further in.
A scatter. Yeah, further up, further in. So anyway, I gotta run.
All right, Jeff. It was so good talking to you, man. Thanks for doing this.
It was
I
good
really
to
appreciate it.
To talk to you, and I'm okay with posting this. I don't know about you.
Me too. I didn't cry, so
Those are the best ones. Those are the best ones. I agree with Luke that when we're crying, we're actually getting to something meaningful.
So, I know. So I guess we missed it. Next time. Next time.
We'll see if we can be meaningful.
All right.
All right.
Cool.
I'll stop it here.
All right.